Robert Edward Lee commanded the Army of Northern Virginia, surrendered at Appomattox in 1865, later died of heart failure, 1870. Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson dominated the Shenandoah Valley through brilliant tactics, was shot by his own men, died of pneumonia, 1863. Nathan Bedford Forrest rose from private to cavalry general through raw instinct, later died from complications of diabetes, 1877. James Longstreet served as Lee's trusted corps commander, later died peacefully of pneumonia, 1904. John Bell Hood led aggressive assaults, lost an arm and leg, died of yellow fever, 1879. Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard fired the war's opening shots at Fort Sumter, commanded several armies, later died of heart disease, 1893. Joseph Eggleston Johnston repeatedly retreated before Sherman during the Atlanta campaign, later died of pneumonia after attending Sherman's funeral, 1891. Jubal Anderson Early lived long after the war, dying from a fall, 1894. Ambrose Powell Hill was famed for forced marches under Lee, killed by Union soldiers days before Appomattox, surrendered 1865. Wade Hampton III commanded elite Confederate cavalry after Stuart's death, dying of natural causes, 1902. George Washington Custis Lee commanded Richmond's defenses, was captured retreating to Appomattox, later died peacefully of natural causes, 1913. Fitzhugh Lee led skilled cavalry operations, later became a U.S. Army general in 1898, eventually died of heart failure, 1905. John Cabell Breckinridge served as Confederate Secretary of War during the collapse, later lived abroad, dying of illness, 1875. Braxton Bragg won at Chickamauga but failed to capitalize, faced heavy criticism, later collapsed suddenly and died, 1876. Richard Stoddard Ewell lost a leg in 1862, hesitated critically at Gettysburg, later died of illness within days of his wife, 1872. Patrick Ronayne Claiborne proposed freeing enslaved men to fight for the South, was killed leading an assault at Franklin, 1864. John Brown Gordon rose from lawyer to top commander, later died of natural causes, 1904. Daniel Harvey Hill discovered Lee's lost battle orders before Antietam, sparking chaos, later lived long, dying of cancer, 1889. Leonidas Polk, the fighting bishop, commanded troops in the Western Theater, was killed instantly by artillery near Marietta, 1864. Simon Bolivar Buckner surrendered Fort Donaldson in 1862, later became Kentucky's governor, living long before dying naturally, 1914. William Joseph Hardy wrote the Confederacy's standard drill manual, later died of illness, 1873. Richard Taylor, son of a president, was among the last to surrender, later died of chronic illness, 1879. Stephen Dill Lee, the youngest lieutenant general, later founded Mississippi State University, living decades before dying of a stroke, 1908. Edmund Kirby Smith commanded isolated Trans-Mississippi, later died after being struck by a train, 1893. Alexander Peter Stewart, Old Strait, later helped preserve Chickamauga's battlefield, dying naturally, 1908. John Porter Pemberton, Northern-born, surrendered Vicksburg and became a scapegoat, later lived quietly, dying of heart disease, 1881. Richard Heron Anderson later fell into poverty, dying in declining health, 1879. Albert Sidney Johnston, considered the Confederacy's finest general, bled to death from a leg wound, 1862. Theophilus Hunter Holmes commanded ineffectively in the Trans-Mississippi, later died of natural causes, 1880. Benjamin Franklin Cheatham fought hard across nearly every Western battle, later lived quietly for decades, dying of natural causes, 1886. John Porter McCown was later court-martialed for insubordination, eventually dying of natural causes, 1879. Howell Cobb, a former Treasury Secretary, later died suddenly of a heart attack, 1868. Henry Heth's search for shoes accidentally triggered Gettysburg's opening battle, dying naturally, 1899. Bushrod Rust Johnson fought hard through the disastrous defeat at Nashville, dying of a stroke, 1880. Edward Johnson, Old Clubby, was captured during Spotsylvania's Bloody Angle fighting, dying naturally, 1873. William Brimage Bate, wounded 3 times in battle, later served as a U.S. Senator, dying of heart failure, 1905. Matthew Callbreath Butler lost a foot at Brandy Station, later became a U.S. Senator, dying naturally, 1909. Robert Frederick Hoke recaptured Plymouth, North Carolina in one of the war's cleanest victories, later died naturally, 1912. Joseph Brevard Kershaw fought through Antietam, Gettysburg, and the Shenandoah Valley, dying naturally, 1894. John Stevens Bowen helped defend Vicksburg before its surrender, fell gravely ill during retreat, died of dysentery, 1863. William Lawson Kemper was severely wounded during Pickett's charge, later became Virginia's governor, dying of lingering complications, 1895. David Rumph Jones commanded promisingly early in the war, but died suddenly of heart disease, 1863. William Henry Fitzhugh Lee, Robert E. Lee's son, was wounded and captured, later exchanged, dying of heart failure, 1891. Lunsford Lindsay Lomax led cavalry through the Shenandoah Valley, later became a national park superintendent, dying naturally, 1913. William Wing Loring, a one-armed veteran, later commanded Egyptian troops abroad, later died of natural causes, 1886. Mansfield Lovell was blamed for losing New Orleans in 1862, later died of pneumonia, 1884. John Calvin Brown was wounded multiple times, later became Tennessee's governor, dying of natural causes, 1889. Thomas James Churchill surrendered his garrison at Arkansas Post, later became Arkansas's governor, dying of natural causes, 1905. Henry Delamere Clayton was wounded at Chickamauga, later led the University of Alabama, dying of natural causes, 1889. James Patton Anderson fought through the brutal Atlanta campaign, dying of illness, 1772. George Bibb Crittenden struggled with alcoholism, resigned after a defeat at Mill Springs, later died of natural causes, 1880. Daniel Smith Donaldson designed Fort Donelson's defenses, fell ill during the war, dying before its midpoint, 1863. Arnold Elzey was severely wounded in battle, later oversaw Richmond's defenses, dying from lingering wartime complications, 1771. James Fleming Fagan led cavalry raids during Price's failed Missouri campaign, dying naturally, 1893. Charles William Field was severely wounded at Second Manassas, dying of natural causes, 1892. John Horace Forney defended Mobile's crucial coastal fortifications for years, dying naturally, 1902. Samuel Gibbs French, New Jersey-born, fought through the grinding Atlanta campaign, dying naturally, 1910. Franklin Gardner defended Port Hudson through a lengthy siege, surrendering days after Vicksburg fell, died naturally, 1873. Jeremy Francis Gilmer engineered key fortifications defending Richmond and Atlanta, dying naturally, 1883. Brian Grimes fought relentlessly until Appomattox's final surrender, was later assassinated by an ambusher near his home, 1880. Harry Thompson Hayes led the fierce Louisiana Tigers through brutal Eastern battles, dying naturally, 1876. Thomas Carmichael Hindman imposed harsh martial law in Arkansas, made bitter enemies, later assassinated through a window, 1868. Benjamin Huger was criticized for sluggish performance during the 7 Days Battles, dying naturally, 1877. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. History Chronicles has many more fascinating stories waiting for you. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next incredible journey into history.